Okay.
Okay, tell me, Grimani.
Yes, Prof. My question is, will be the exam on 28 or 29? Because I've
No,
seen
it's not the
the,
exam. That's just your presentation. The
yeah,
exam
yeah,
is
I mean,
at the end
oh,
of
okay.
the lesson tomorrow. I'm going to give you all the dates of your exam. One is the 4th of June. Then there are 2 dates in June, one in July, two in September.
Okay.
So at
So
the end of
during the presentation day, we will only discuss our project.
yes, but I won't tell you anything because I will only make my opinion clear at, during the exam. In fact, I won't tell you anything. It will be a cross fertilization among the students. So you will discuss that
Okay.
with your colleagues, and the other ones will tell you what they think of it if they want to. They are not compelled, but I won't say anything. The only important thing is that you will still have time, according to the suggestions of your colleagues, to change your project work up to 1 week before the date of the exam you choose, because I need about 1 week to read over it, because I don't want to end up, the day before the
Mhm.
exam and spending the night reading and evaluating your project work. So you have some time, but not much. If you're choosing the 4th of June, then you must finish everything by the 28th of May. But if you choose another
Okay.
date, you still have more time. Okay, we can go ahead now. I'll, I think we've seen this. I've showed this slide, the past lesson. I want to draw your attention on the fact that your task, each square is a task, right? Now you have jobs that are made of one task, and that's the issue that we will discuss today. I told you the other time that I will use the first 15-20 minutes to read some pieces of work by Francis Taylor, who was actually the one that started the scientific management of work design at, at the beginning of the 20th century. But even though it seems like it's a long time ago, the reason why I speak to you about it is because it's actually still used around the world, and we'll see why. Now, you see, so the invention of scientific management is to have a very simple job which consists of one and only one task with no variety and no job autonomy. People working under the conditions of scientific management, they have to do exactly what they are told to do, and they cannot do anything else. I also told you the main principles, and remember, and the first, you see that the heavy burden for managers, well, I would, for what we shall see, is not such a heavy burden. They develop a science for each element of a man's work, which replaces the old rule of thumb method. Rule of thumb, I told you, is approximation, is an approximate. So it is, that's why it's called scientific. Second, they scientifically select and then train, teach, and develop the workman, whereas in the past he chose his own work and trained himself as best as he could. Third, they heartily cooperate with the man so as to ensure all of the work being done in accordance with the principles of science which has been developed. Fourth, there is an almost equal division of the work and the responsibility between the management and the workmen. The management take over, because it's plural, take over all work for which they are better fitted than the workmen. While in the past, almost all of the work and the greater part of responsibility were thrown upon the men. So this is taken now, this is 2004 because they reprinted it, but the original work by Taylor is dated 1911. Now I'll go on and read some parts of the book which I think are very interesting, and you'll get an idea of how this thing works. Oh, let me see. See, this is the title. This book was actually was. See, this is the title, "The Principles of Scientific Management," and the author is Friedrich Winslow Taylor. This is a photocopy of the book, which was then scanned. Now, and I'll tell you the beginning, the reasoning that he makes. So, the principal object of management should be to secure the maximum prosperity for the employer, coupled with the maximum prosperity for each employee. Now, you tell me if it would seem to be so self-evident that maximum prosperity for the employer coupled with maximum prosperity for the employee ought to be the two leading objects of management, that even to state this fact should be unnecessary. And yet, a large part of the organization of employers as well as employees is for war rather than for peace. Now, what was the picture at the beginning of the past century, that is at the end of 1800 and the beginning of 1900? It was that there were all around the world, trade unions were being organized that wanted to have better working conditions, and employers were reacting to that by refusing to agree on the requests of employees. So he came out with this idea and his techniques that we shall see. And I told you the four basic principles, but then we'll see how it works in practice. But so he actually experimented and said, well, with my technique, you can pay people a bit more and they will work more. So you have to listen to me, because I'm going to tell you the majority of these men believe that the fundamental interests of employees and employers are necessarily antagonistic. And much of this idea is still holding sway, but in part it is true and necessarily antagonistic, but to what extent? Anyway, some of the parts, now let's see, you see, wait a minute. Let's go on. So what they did, with his people, he was the inventor of consultants or consultancy. Actually, was the first one to have on his business card consultant to management. So he did a lot of experiments in Bethlehem Steel in the United States, and I'll read you some parts so that you get a fair idea what he was talking about. So we'll get it. Under scientific management, the initiative of the workmen, that is their work, hard work, their goodwill and their ingenuity, is obtained with absolute uniformity and to a greater extent than is possible under the old system. Now, what was the old system? Well, in general, with the Industrial Revolution, artisans were displayed by the factory work. Work in factories were actually the work was arranged in a very standardized manner, and actually Taylor was the inventor of the scientific approach to work, so that artisans didn't have. You see, to summarize, under the management of initiative and incentive, practically the whole problem is up to the workman, while under scientific management, fully one half of the problem is up to the management. That is, before, the artisan would try to do his best and or her best, and but then with the new style, and so actually if the artisan was good and was producing appropriate and very uh, interesting work, then if he had such initiative, he could get an incentive from from management or from people that would would use his work. Whereas with the scientific management, what is up to management? To study the way and the standards that should guide uh, workers in the factories. Now let's see what he says. Perhaps the most prominent single element in modern scientific management is the task idea. The work of every workman is fully planned out by the management at least one day in advance, and each man receives, in most cases, complete written instructions describing in detail the task which he is to accomplish, as well as the means to be used in doing the work. And the work planned in advance in this way constitutes a task which is to be solved, as explained above, not by the workman alone, but in almost all cases by the joint effort of the workman and the management. This task specifies not only what is to be done, but how it is to be done and the exact time allowed for doing it. And whenever the workman succeeds in doing his task right and within the time limit specified, he receives an addition of from 30% to 100% to his ordinary wages. These tasks are carefully planned so that both good and careful work are called for in their performance. But it should be distinctly understood that in no case is the workman called upon to work at a pace which would be injurious to his health. Now we'll see that this is not exactly what it is going to happen. But anyway, again, yeah, to read some other piece. The pig. Now, the experiments he made to convince the employers to adopt this scientific management is the experiment that Bethlehem still works. He studied the way a pig iron handler. Do you understand? Pig iron is not steel. Is un unsophisticated steel, very hard but fragile. And it was actually uh, pig iron was used at the end of the 18th century to build cannons that were used, and that's why he came to have to make these experiments in the war, in the Spanish-American War at the beginning, at the end of the 18th century. So a pig iron, ingots of pig iron, and the handler stoops down, picks up a pig weighing about 92 pounds. He will hold it like this, walks for a few feet or yards, and then drops it on the ground or upon a pile. This work is so crude and elementary in its nature that the writer firmly believes that it would be possible to train an intelligent gorilla so as to become a more efficient pig iron handler than any man can be. Now, the idea is that you have to make things as standardized as possible so that anyone can be trained to do a very simple job. So let's go on with with some more explanation. So what happens? He says, one of the first pieces of work undertaken by us when the writer started to introduce scientific management to the Bethlehem Steel Company was to handle pig iron on task work. The opening of the Spanish War found some 80,000 tons of pig iron placed in small piles in an open field adjoining the works. Prices for pig iron had been so low that it could not be sold at a profit, and it therefore had been stored. With the opening of the Spanish War, the price of pig iron rose, and this large accumulation of iron was sold. This gave us a good opportunity to show the workmen, as well as the owners and managers of the works, on a fairly large scale, the advantages of task work over the old-fashioned day work and piecework in doing a very elementary class work. The Bethlehem Steel Company had 5 blast furnaces that the product of which had been handled by a pig iron gang for many years. This gang at this time consisted of about 70 5 men. So what they did was we found that this gang were loading on the average about 12.5 long tons, which each long ton is about 1,000 kilograms, which means that each pig iron of 92 pounds, in order to make a 1 long ton, you'd have to carry and load on the pile about 11 ingots of pig iron. We were surprised to find after
Sorry,
studying the.
Professor. Sorry, can I interrupt you?
Pardon?
Yeah, can you reshare the screen because I don't see anything. It's like stuck.
You cannot see the slides.
No,
Oh,
it's
wow.
like pink slide. Yep.
Yes, I think is blocked in the slide 25.
Yeah.
Well,
for me the same.
now can you see it or not?
Not yet.
No.
No, always the same slide.
Same for F1. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, 1 second. We see if we can. Now you should be seeing it. Okay?
Yes, finally. Thank you.
Oh, it's good.
We found that this gang were loading on the average about 12.5 long tons per man per day. We were surprised to find after studying the matter that the first class pig iron handler ought to handle between 47 and 48 long tons per day instead of 12.5 tons. This task given to us so very large that we were obliged to go over our work several times before we were absolutely sure that we were right. So in fact, I say, if you adopt our methods, then they told the owners of the steel, Bethlehem Steel, is your people, instead of handling 12 tons per day, they will handle 47 to 48 tons per day. So almost increasing by some 4 times the work that was done before. So they told the owner, said, look, your workmen will produce 4 times as much as before and will be paid as a price only from 30 to 100% their wage, which was $1.15. So they would they would produce 4 times as much. So they would have an increase between 30 to 100%, whereas they would produce 4 times as much as they were doing before in comparison to what they were doing before. So what they did, they wanted, why is it called scientific management? Because let me just go over, I'll show you how why is it called scientific management? Because what they did is that the first step was the scientific selection of the workman. In dealing with workmen under this type of management, it is an inflexible rule to talk to and deal with only one man at a time, since each workman has his own special abilities and limitations. And since we were not dealing with men in masses, but are trying to develop each individual man to his highest state of efficiency and prosperity. So what he chose. Finally, we selected one from among the 4. So they had a gang of 75 men. They picked 4. They thought they were the strongest and the more willing to work. And then out of those 4, they chose one, a likely man to start with. He was a little Pennsylvania Dutchman who had been, so he was an immigrant in the United States at the end of the 18th century, who had been observed to trot back home for a mile or so after his work in the evening, about as fresh as he was when he came trotting down to work in the morning. We found that upon wages of 115 a day, he had succeeded in buying a small plot of ground and that he was engaged in putting up the walls of a little house for himself in the morning before starting to work at the night after leaving. So the idea was, look, if he is so fresh when he's coming down to work and when he goes back home that he still wants to work for himself, then we can use him to show that he can work fourfold as hard as he's now used to. So they approached him and they said, the task before us then narrowed itself down to getting Schmidt, that's the name of the worker, to handle 47 tons of pig iron per day and making him glad to do it. This was done as follows. Schmidt was called out from among the gang of pig iron handlers and talked to somewhat in this way. Schmidt, are you a high-priced man? And now he mimics also the Netherlands accent. Well, I don't know what you mean. Oh, yes, you do. What I want to know is whether you are a high-priced man or not. Well, I don't know what you mean. Oh, come on now. You answer my questions. What I want to find out is whether you are a high-priced man or one of these cheap fellows here, his colleagues, you know. What I want to find out is whether you want to earn $1.85 a day or whether you are satisfied with $1.15, just the same as all those cheap fellows are getting. Did I want $1.85 a day? Was that a high-priced man? Well, yes, I was a high-priced man. Oh, you are aggravating me. No, of course you want. Of course you want $1.85 a day. Everyone wants it. You know perfectly well that has very little to do with your being a high-priced man. For goodness sake, answer my questions and don't waste any more of my time. Now come over here. You see that pile of pig iron? Yes. You see that car? Yes. Well, if you're a high-priced man, you will load that pig iron on that car of a train, of course, tomorrow for $1.85. Now, do wake up and answer my question. Tell me whether you are a high-priced man or not. Well, did I got $1.85 for loading that pig iron on that car tomorrow? Yes, of course you do. And you get $1.85 for loading a pile like that every day right through the year. That is what a high-priced man does. And you know it just as well as I do. Well, that's all right. I could load that pig iron on the car tomorrow for $1.85, and I get it every day, don't I? Certainly you do, certainly you do. Well then, I was a high-priced man. Now, hold on. You know just as well as I do that a high-priced man has to do exactly as he's told from morning till night. You have seen this man here before, haven't you? No, I never saw him. He was showing a foreman. Well, if you are a high-priced man, you will do exactly as this man tells you tomorrow, from morning till night. When he calls you to pick up a pig and walk, you pick it up and you walk. And when he tells you to sit down and rest, you sit down. You do that right straight through the day. And what's more, no back talk. Back talk means questioning and saying, oh, I'm too tired, I cannot go on. Now, a high-priced man does just what he's told to do and no back talk. Do you understand that? When this man tells you to walk, you walk. When he tells you to sit down, you sit down and you don't talk back at him. Now, you come on to work here tomorrow morning and I know before night whether you are really a high-priced man or not. This seems to be rather rough talk, and indeed it would be if it applied to an educated mechanic or even an intelligent laborer. With a man of the mentally sluggish type of Schmidt, it is appropriate and not unkind, since it is effective in fixing his attention on the high wages which he wants and away from what, if it were called to his attention, he probably would consider impossibly hard work. What would Schmidt answer be if he were talked to in a manner which is usual under the management of initiative and incentive, say as follows? Now, Schmidt, you are a first-class pig iron handler and know your business well. You have been handling at a rate of 12.5 tons per day. I have given a considerable study to handling pig iron, and feel sure that you could do as much larger days work than you have been doing. Now, don't you think that if you really tried, you could handle 47 tons of pig iron per day instead of 12.5 tons? Now, Taylor shows that here with this example that you should not question your certainties as a scientific researcher on way the work has to be done. You cannot ask if you have initiative, you can raise your product from 12.5 tons to 48 tons because the person will never do that. Will say, no, it's impossible, no matter what the incentive is. You have to tell him that if he wants to get paid that way, he has to follow exactly what is told to do. Now, what happens that with these examples, after that, after 1911, in a short time, this scientific method of organizing labor was adopted straight from many factories in the United States. So what happened that, of course, you had the problems, health problems, because this kind of work was to increase the work by 4 times, this heavy work. I told you, when you carry 92 pounds, which is about 45 kilograms of these ingots, very heavy ingots, and you do that 800 times per day, so that you can carry 48 tons, then you can understand that that's very, that's so that it became so bad, the working condition was so bad in the United States that and now we see that what happened, they had a parliamentary investigation on the working conditions across the factories, especially the steel companies in the United States, that it came about that this, I'll read you just a very short piece of the result of this investigation done by the parliament in the United States in 1915. So only after 4 years from the publication of Taylor's book. Now, I interrupt. We don't share it any longer. I go again to my slides. Okay, here. Good evening. Now, okay, do you see the former slide then, or not?
Yes,
Yeah.
Professor.
Okay. Now I'll show you. We go from here to this one. Now look at this. Robert Franklin Oxley, Special Investigator of Scientific Management of the United States Commission of Industrial Relations. This was published in 1920, but actually this investigation was made in 1915. What was written there, just as the conclusion was there. It condemns the worker to a monotonous routine, tends to deprive him of thought, initiative, sense of achievement, and joy in his work, dwarfs and represses him intellectually, tends to destroy his individuality and inventive genius, increases the danger of industrial accidents, tends to undermine the worker's health, shortens his period of industrial activity and earning power, and brings on premature old age. It puts into the hands of employers at large an immense mass of information and methods which may be used unscrupulously to the detriment of the workers, creates the possibility of systematic blacklisting. It means if you don't do the work I told you to do, then I kick you out and I put you in a blacklist, and I'll tell this blacklist to the managers of the other factories, so you will not get any work any longer anywhere, and offers no guarantee against the abuse of its professed principles and practices. So this special investigation was fully against the adoption of scientific management. Now, the question is, why did I show this? It's not only for historical reasons, it's because this kind of work is still applied nowadays across the board in the world, not only in the steel industry or in heavy factory work, but also, and I'll show you an example. This is an example that's taken from from a book of 2005, but still now look, this is a checklist of a supervisor that is checking the work of one of his workmen. Look at here, this assembling the order. This is the title of this. Now, one, the order is assembled in the proper sequence. Grill slips are handed in first. Drinks are poured in the proper sequence, proper amount of ice. Cups slanted and fingered used to activate, the tap. Drinks are filled to the proper level. Drinks are capped, and the supervisor has to write yes or no. Holding times are observed on coffees. Cups are filled to the proper level of coffee. That is other issues that you want to observe. Yes or no? Presenting the order. It's properly packaged. The bag is double folded. Plastic trays are used if eating inside. A tray liner is used. The food is handled in a proper manner. Whatever, if the supervisor wants to add other issues. Asking for and receiving payment. The amount of the order is stated clearly and loud enough to hear. The denomination received is clearly stated. The change is counted out loud. Change is counted efficiently. Large bills are laid on the bar until the change is given. Thanking the customer and asking him to repeat business. There is always a thank you. The thank you is sincere. There is eye contact. Return business was asked for. Now, this is a management observation checklist used to evaluate the performance of counter staff in a fast food restaurant. That's what happens every day in all fast foods around the world. So when we say, oh, but what Taylor practiced about over a century ago is not any longer updated. No, it's not true. That's what happens in any fast food. If you go when you go next time to a fast food, and each one of us, I don't go any longer, but obviously in my life I've been several times, but something like half a dozen to a dozen times I went myself. And the last time I went there was about 3 years ago, and since I found this checklist on this book, I managed to observe the work, and actually it's done exactly in this fashion. So it is a scientific work organized as Taylor said, and it's not in a factory, it's in a fast food restaurant. So as you can see, but then it's not only that the supervisor are openly this way, but look at what they say on a chat. Mechanization takes command, organizations as machines. So people working in this kind of machine. Now, look, I'll show you a chat in McDonald's. What a McDonald's talk LJ. McDonald's talk of LJ. User info sheet. Now look at it. I've decided recently that it's not the teenagers calling in that bothers me. This is a supervisor. Most about working on the nights and weekends. It's something to be expected that the kids are going to be kids and want to go out and party with friends. I still find it annoying, of course, but recently there is something more that has been bothering me. What really bothers me lately is the parents who tell their kids to call in because of something unimportant. I just don't understand why parents would teach their kids things like work doesn't matter simply because it's just McDonald's. Do they not get what they are just making these kids worse off for any job they have later in life, thinking it's okay to blow off work? Now look at this I think I used to work in a restaurant with a lot of minors. Honestly, yes, they did call off. But like you, I didn't let it get to me because most of the time minors will work twice as hard under twice as stressful situation and not get huffy and puffy about it. Now that I work at a store that is 95% with 18 or more years old, I find that single mothers tend to be very, very, very needy. Not that I have a bone to pick with the single mothers, seeing as how my own sister is one, but they have every excuse in the book. It seems like they alone tend to turn into hypochondriacs and want more hours, but then call off 1 or more times a week. Yeah, I had my share of that at another store. I really don't understand people that really need hours, but when they get them, it's like there is always some emergency with the kid that can't be taken care of by anyone else. So as you can see, it's not only the workers, but also the supervisors that are actually doing this kind of small talk against the workers, besides the fact that workers have to work at the pace that is established, as I showed you, with these activities, with this, it's all small tasks. They have no autonomy. They have to do exactly what they are told to, and they are observed, and they are obviously criticized, and sometimes they are going to be sacked just because they are not doing exactly what they've been told to do. Exactly. Now you see this, there is eye contact. Return business must ask for the thank you is sincere. What do you mean by saying thank you sincere? Thank you for having come to McDonald's or to whatever other Kentucky Fried Chicken or whatever. It's not that this is against McDonald's only. It's something that has to do with this kind of work. Now, any comments on your part? We stop here for a 10 minutes break because it's 3:45. And so since we have to go on with other interesting things, just some comments and then we have a break. What is your impression here? Well, okay, we have, let me see. Sano, Mr. Sano, do you have any comment?
No, it's not concerning the lectures. I just want to make some clarity. I want you to clear something for me, please, if you
Yes.
want.
Yes.
It's about the exams, because when you were talking with Vanessa, I was not around, so I want to clear it, because I thought the exam was going to be the
Wait, I'll clarify this thing about the exam at the end of the lesson. Now we talk about what we've been seeing, because otherwise we use up the precious time. So
okay,
comments on what I just told you about
clear.
Scientific management of work.
Everything is clear. Thank you.
And the fact that it was not only at the beginning of the 19th century, but it's what is happening nowadays in fast food restaurants, for example, maybe in other places as well, or in the sweatshops around the world. In the Rana Plaza disaster, that was a way that people worked in those places. So do you agree on the fact that
I agree with that, especially with the
it's a fact, right? It's
the fact when it comes to restaurants and unskilled laborers, those who are not skilled. This is the way they have been used in their various workplaces, because individual productivity is what they measure. So teamwork is lacking in most of the times, and then they want to see how much you could go. Because I was a victim of this thing once. I don't say in general, but then I was working for a restaurant where I was a lover party. So yeah. I learned a lot as a person when I realized that my boss wouldn't want me to stand. Die, veloce, veloce. So it's like, okay, you always want me to work my ass out. I'm sorry to use this word, but okay, it's more like that in the unskilled laborers' point of view. This is how they want to use us. So I was a lover party for 2 months, and I've been confronted with this kind of management, and I agree with you 100%. Thank you.
Right. Now, one thing to observe is that, for example, in restaurants, you have small units. A restaurant is very seldom. It's more than besides the waiters in the kitchen. Only seldom there are more than 5 or 6 people.
Yeah.
Including the lavapiatti, as you say.
Including lavapiatti. Yeah. I was a professional
small companies. Usually, trade unions cannot get in because you know, it's just they are all going to be fired, they are blacklisted and everything. So
I agree.
all units are very difficult to be organized in a more sensible way. So that's, I thought, you know, as since we've been speaking from the last lesson of power, conflict, and the control. This was the end, and then we said also we use the, and we'll go a little bit in the next lesson, that is both the next hour and tomorrow we'll go into change management. That is what happens when companies first want to change because they need to change because they are undergoing a crisis, and second, they by changing they can apply the uh, the directive of 2001 of the European Union concerning the social responsibility in companies, and so you know, I told you the basic principles. Now, in the case we are going to see in the second hour today, in the third and fourth hour tomorrow morning, tomorrow in the lessons of tomorrow, we'll see in practice how you go, how you approach change management without without scientific management. Okay.
Okay, interesting.
Now we have a 10 minutes at 4 o'clock on the dot. I'll start again. Okay.
Thank you, Professor.
Okay, you're welcome. We'll see you.
Thank you, Professor. See you later.
See you later.
Sorry, Professor, can I ask you something? Like,
Yes.
I told you the brand that I chose for the exam, and it is H&M.
Well,
But
as I told you, we'll speak about this at the end of the lesson. Then at the end at 4:55, we don't.
okay.
So because also Lamin Sano had a question concerning the exam, so we'll do all this at the end of the around 5 o'clock in an
Okay.
hour. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you. See you later.
Okay. Bye. Okay. Welcome back.
Yeah, we're here.
Hello.
I hope I will be
Okay.
because
Here we are. You can see the, don't you? So we started this today, this last hour, and tomorrow we'll get onto the Kurt-Lewin's approach and how it is to be applied, this method, onto a case of action research, which I actually undertook myself a few years ago. And so we'll get into all the problems and all the advantages of approaching things in a very different way from the one that was that we have seen just now. But of course, otherwise it wouldn't be appropriate. It's of course Taylor was not speaking, was approaching this kind of work in this kind of very simple kind of work. It wouldn't have been possible to apply it in, for example, for software, for software developers or other things like that. Okay, so wait a minute. Let's see. Wait a minute. I interrupted the 1 second. Okay. One moment. Still. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, we can see.
Okay, fine. So, Kurt Lewin's approach now. Kurt Lewin actually was born in Poland at the end of the 18th century, and he became a social psychologist. Now, we've spoken about social psychology in the sense that when I told you about the technological imperative and the Tavistock Institute, they were a lot of, and when we saw that the technological imperative has certain precise limitation, they were discovered by social psychologists. Now, Kurt Lewin is one of the people that actually worked on, not with the Tavistock Institute, because Tavistock is in Great Britain, but in the United States. So it's actually the reaction against Taylor's scientific approach. The social psychologists actually could develop their work concerning companies because it became acceptable that people work for what we've seen in the preceding lesson on motivation, right? So they are all looking for how people could be motivated, because people have to be not only trained to do exactly what they're told, that is the task management, which in general is called motion time management. So especially in professions, in work where there is no time and motion management, that okay, you have to work during an 8-hour or a 6-hour period according to where you are working, but then you cannot standardize your work. You need to have an active participation of people. That's why we were talking about empowerment the previous lesson, not today, but a week ago. So Kurt Lewins is I would say the father of a few things. We see his approach now, and the first, okay. Force field theory of change. Now I'll show you this. Now we see that the company is at this level of performance. This performance means that you can calculate it as you want. Can be performance in environmental conditions, could be in environmental responsibility. That is the data you gathered and that were published by the company you studied, for example, in a non-financial statement, or can be a level of performance just taking profits, or whatever measure you want to take. So it means that if you are here and you want to go to have it higher, either as an environmental responsibility or a social responsibility, or even only market share or whatever, you want to go from this level onto this level, right? Then you have to have a change. You have to change something. Now, if you are at this level, it means that the forces that are driving towards change and the resistance to change are actually equal, so that people that want to change the situation and people that want to stay with the present situation are actually as powerful. They're both exerting the same force. And so that's why you have this level of performance. If you want to reach a higher level of performance, you have to to give to support people that want to change. For example, concerning environmental protection, for example, and you have to defeat, let's say, resistance to change. That is, maybe people that in their approach, they don't want to go on towards a circular economy approach of the company, or environmental issues or social issues. So you have to, the basic idea is that you have, if you want to have change in a company, you have to support management, to support people inside that are addressing change, and they have to overcome the resistance to change that's on the part of other people. It's based mostly on willingness of people to change. Now, why do people resist change? Because maybe they are afraid of what's, or how their work is going to change, and saying, okay, who is going to guarantee that my work will be better if we change the way the company is managed, because we're going to have better environmental goals, and have we are more successful concerning certain measures of energy saving, etc. Who can be against it? Well, if this change means that we are changing, they are changing my job, how do I know that the new job will be better? And it would, I am motivated now by my job. So if no one is actually explaining to me what's going to happen, then maybe I resist change. So you need to support people that are supporting change, and try to convince the other ones that nothing bad will happen to them, or that at least what will happen to them is necessary to have the company go towards a better future, be that for the social responsibility, environmental responsibility, or marketing, or market share, or whatever that the issue is concerning change. So many times resistant to change, Lewin's uh, findings show that many times it's due because people are not involved, are not explaining what's going to happen. They need to have these changes, etc. So, so you have to, when you have to start change in a company, you have to realize what is the field of forces within the company, because people are moved by what their peers are doing. Who is resisting to change? Is it someone that has a good reputation, or resistance to change is just for people that are on the they are not very wise, they're just waiting for their retirement, so they're not motivated, don't really want to change because it means that it is an effort, and they just want to drift along towards their retirement. So you have to understand in a company what's going on, when who's driving towards change and who is resisting. The other part is saying that, well, another contribution by Lewin's is the following, is action research. In other words, up to the years 40s, the end of the 40s, that is after the Second World War, I mean, even in the scholars in the universities were saying, well, you must not get involved in practical work on the field, because research is pure. Otherwise your theory will not be saved. You are going to be distracted by specific issues which are not relevant for the overall discipline. But then, in fact, the Second World War dropped some of the basic some conceptions, and researchers said that, well, we actually, through the specific work in the field, can find empirical evidence of changing the theory that's been holding sway that far. So it's not an action research field research, is actually part of the theoretical endeavor that all scholars must undertake. So what he says, well, any kind of change that you're going to make needs an action research, because you have to analyze the present state of the organization, in which you'll find out what are the forces that are against change and which ones are in favor of it. Identify a future state, that is, I want to reach this new performance, and how am I going to do it? So you implement the planned actions, identify future state and the actions you need to implement to reach the future state. Then you evaluate the actions that you have. So these actions are not the last ones. You have to experiment. You have a pilot studies, pilot experiments, you evaluate the actions, and then you decide what actions have to be undertaken, and you have experimented that the drawbacks, the negative aspects are not so strong, and so you can go ahead and institutionalize action research. That is, what does that mean? That the actions were good, and so the planned actions were appropriate, so they will become the new standards, but not in a scientific work fashion that is in a Taylor's approach in Lewin's. So you see, and what does he call? He says that this phase here, to analyze the present state of the organization, it means to unfreeze the situation, to unfreeze the company. Then this area here is called the turbulence, because you identify a future state, but it's when uncertainty is going to be in the company, because people are not sure that they are taking part in some experimentations, in some actions that are actually being studied to see if they are appropriate or not to bring in the changes that decided to go ahead and try to change the company. So this is a state of turbulence, because people, maybe some that were in favor, are now going against the change. Some that were against it, they find out that, well, it is not as bad as we thought. So they join in the change forces. So that's why it's called turbulence. And then refreezing, that is not freezing in the negative way, but you just stabilize what you decided here. You analyze the present state, you identify the future state, you go through turbulence, and then you find you find the new level of performance that you want. And therefore, that's why you can institutionalize action research. Action research, you actually find research of what? Or what are the appropriate actions that will take the company from a certain performance level to a new performance level, that is the one that you're looking for. But you go to this situation through a period of turbulence, in which you're not actually sure what's going to happen. You are experimenting, which doesn't mean that you're just going by attempts and failures. You are studying it, but you identify the future state, but then you're ready to change some of the actions that you planned, because you see, while you're going on, when you have designed the change, then maybe you didn't take into consideration certain emerging. Remember that when we spoke about complexity, we said that in complexity you have different strategies that are being performed by different actors, so that by the interaction of these different actors, the outcomes cannot be predicted exactly from the beginning, but you have to monitor the situation constantly. And so you identify the future station, but then you see the planned action, what their outcomes are, and you decide either to change them or to confirm them. If you confirm it, then the action research you perform with the variation, the changes that happen through the period of change, then you institutionalize, means that you the successful actions are going to be the ones that are going to be followed in order to achieve the new performance levels. In other words, if the company is actually what you have to undertake in the company that is approaching the circular economy and wants to, for example, adopt some of the techniques, maybe I'm just inventing, I'm a 3D production, a 3D printing, okay? So whatever in order to change from one situation to another one, then you have to follow this scheme here, this method, this model here is actually, he invented it at the end of the years 40s, but then I would say that most consulting firms, even the most famous ones, they are actually they're applying this methodology, even though they won't say that they do. But when you speak about Accenture that says that the situation as is and the situation to be, actually they are saying they are identifying the future state and the situation as is. They are analyzing the present state of the organization. So most of the consultancy work is based on this kind of model here. Now, let's see. It says that you need to sustain change all throughout this model. Participative learning process, widespread participation, understanding, and learning. Because in that way, what are you going to do to achieve the fact that resistance to change is overcome, by means of participate learning process, widespread participation, understanding, and learning. This involvement of people, even the ones that are resistant to change, of course, if then they keep on saying, no, we don't want, we are not in favor of that, then they will have, many times they will either decide to go and work for other companies, or in a way they just won't be the leaders of the new company, okay? So these are actually some of the basic, the management, the top management that wants to have this change needs to sustain this change, not just saying we're going in this direction, just leave things and say that the goodwill of people will just act. No, they need to sustain change by participative learning process, widespread participation, understanding, and learning. So that, cause of action, cause of communication will have to support this change. And maybe new people should be hired. Remember when we spoke about the digital transformation? Well, then I showed you, so we were addressing the skills that are needed for this digital transformation. And digital transformation is actually the change management, needs change management. And it needs a participative learning process. And different skills, not only technical skills, are needed, like critical thinking was one of those skills. So now let's see. This is the case we'll see today and tomorrow. And ICT and information and communication technology and information systems and business and organizing change management. The case in IS outsourcing, this is the bio case. It's
Professor?
Yes?
I'm sorry. Are your slides stuck? Check the slide. It's stuck at one place.
Now can you see it?
Yeah, it's still at
Yeah,
the
Prof.
first.
Also,
Still at the first.
yeah.
Mhm.
It's only the title now. ICTIS in business and organizing change management. The BioCase NIS outsourcing. Now, can you read this or not?
No, Prof.
No
Yes?
problem.
Let's talk at the first one.
No, I think that you need to reshare the screen again.
Yeah, like you did last time, maybe same thing.
Let's see.
Mm.
Can you see it now?
Yeah.
ICT, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So the case we're going to see is the fact that Bio is a company, an outsourcing company. What is an outsourcing company? Actually, it's an outsourcee. You outsource a service when you decide, for example, a company has an indoor cafeteria, and the people that are running the cafeteria are people that are employees of the company. You decide that your business is not for running cafeterias, including your own, so you decide to outsource this service, and you're going to have a contract with an outside company that is specialized in this kind of service for companies, cafeterias. In this case, is an information system outsourcing, because a group of banks, because of changes in the regulations, and because of the technological revolution of information systems and information technology, decided that they didn't have enough money to finance an outstanding information system for each one of them. So they decided, if we pull together, if we get together, maybe we can have the resources. We launch a company that's going to take care of the needs of all of our banks, and we are not going to waste the money in because each one of these banks doesn't have enough money to invest in having an outstanding information system. So we put our small resources, we put them together. So we are going to finance a company that's owned by all of us, and that company has enough money to have a state-of-the-art information systems, and it's going to service all of us. So this is the story of how. Now let's see what the problem is here. You see, here you have the banks, you have the vendors of ICTIS, that is information communication technology, information systems. What's the difference? And that you need an organization of functions that are served by communications and by technologies. So it's all what we said about all along this course, that organization is the part that gives blood to technologies, okay? So vendors are the ones that are proposing to the banks certain services, certain technologies, and the banks decide that, okay, we cannot cope. Each one of us cannot. These were a group of 10 banks that were not at the national level in Italy. They were at the sub-region, at the regional level. So they said, we don't have enough money to invest. So what we do, we create a company so that we will be able to satisfy the needs by means of ICT and IS of people and the small, medium-sized enterprises, the requests of services that they ask us. And the vendors are the ones that are going to monitor ICT innovation. And of course, this will be filtered by what? By a company that we own, which you have top management, the staff units, software units, and hardware units. And what is the task? What are the tasks? The job, what is the job of this company? The job of this company is, on one hand, to find out what are the proposals, the offerings of the vendors, and say, hey, these are good or these are not good enough price-wise or for other characteristics. And on the other hand, they would evaluate the needs and the requests of banks and of their clients and say, okay, now what you need is this kind of proposal, this kind of project, because it's going to help you serve your clients, be that ordinary people or small and medium-sized enterprises, and satisfy their requests. So you can actually, by satisfying their requests, you'll have the services of these vendors, and we help you decide where to put your money on which kind of offerings and what kind of proposals. And through our work, you can have better profits. So if you have critical accounts, then you can improve your situation because of what we're doing. And they say, right, you're right. That's the reason why we launched this initiative. And so the thing is that this proposal and offerings and needs and requests, the job of putting these two things together is the job of this company here, which need to have the skills. This company needs to be able to interpret, integrate, choose, and negotiate what? The needs of the banks and the offerings of the vendors. They have to interpret both the needs of banks and the proposals of the vendors. So there's an interpretation of what you're proposing to me. Is it coherent with the needs of the banks? Integrate. Well, do you have 10 banks? We cannot have 10 different information systems, so we must have one common information system that satisfies the requests of all the 10 banks. So we need to integrate the different needs of the 10 banks into one general basic offering. So we need to integrate the different needs of the 10 banks. We have therefore to choose what is the best proposal and the best offerings, negotiate it, saying, hey, look, we are making your task easier, your job easier, because you don't have to go and negotiate with every single bank. You go through us and you negotiate with us, and you negotiate actually what you will offer, what you will do, what you just have to design and implement one project. Well, of course, tailor-made for the group of banks, but then taking into account different needs. But it's easier than having to negotiate with every single bank. So we're actually making your job easier. So for you, it's since we make your job easier, maybe you can give us a better price than just because your costs are less than what you would have if you had to negotiate with all the 10 banks separately. Actually, we are making life easier for you. So if we want here to say where innovation is, in this case, innovation takes place, of course, at the vendors, because they're interpreter of ICT innovation that's taking place maybe at Oracle, maybe at Microsoft, or at MIT, for example. And then innovation is taking place here because they have to understand both the changing needs of banks, because they are changing needs of people in small, medium-sized enterprises. And so they are the interpreters of innovation on the part of their owners, their client owners, and on the part of the vendors. So they need to be in their innovation job is to understand what are the new what is the innovation in the ICT world, what are the needs of the bank, so where they can assist their banks to innovate, because innovation is needed by the new requests of people and enterprises. So when you have an outsourcing information system at large in digital transformation is that you need to have someone within the company that knows what is needed within the company that's undergoing the digital transformation and is able to interpret what's going on in digital innovation at large in the world, in the research centers, and at the same time know what the needs of the company, in this case of 10 companies, was going on. So in a way, you have a flow of services from innovation to service rendered to end users. The end users are people, small, medium-sized enterprises. So actually, what the innovation here, remember when we've seen that artificial intelligence company that was actually approached and partnering with the automotive companies like BMW or Volvo or other car companies, then it actually was something like this company here that is actually specializing in understanding what is going on, what is the offering of the vendors, and understanding the needs of the banks. In this case, the banks are in the place of those car companies which we're referring to. They were outsourcing their artificial intelligence needs of innovation. So actually what we are studying here in this case is something similar to that. Well, I call that a business environment that was undergoing a strong change because of actually the artificial intelligence was applied to the autonomous driving vehicles. In this case, it is more of a basic service of information and communication technologies and information systems, but the principle is more or less the same. Now, let's see what you see. So this flows from innovation to service rendered to end users. Okay, now this is the general model. Now, this general model I prepared before going to the. Now, one interesting thing is that why they decided. Now, they decided after 10 years they have been launching this company. They decided that
For everyone, Professor is blocked.
No.
Yes, for me too.
What blocked him?
Yes, I thought it was my Wi-Fi. Yeah.
Yeah, me too, but so I don't think so.
And Daniel,
Hi, bro. How are you?
what blocked him?
I don't know. I think it's connection.
Maybe.
Yeah.
It's connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
He
can
said,
you see the slide or not?
we
No,
can see,
but we can hear you now.
Can you see it? Can you read it? I don't want to go over it again. Just read it.
No, Professor.
We can see the slide.
You cannot
No.
see it.
No, because I think you have to re-share the screen.
Share the screen, yeah.
Okay.
Screen.
Okay, refresh the screen. Let's see. Okay. Now, can you see it?
Yeah.
Yes, bro.
Okay. You read, please, this because you have the whole purpose here. With the purpose of outsourcing, ICT considered to be too costly. Okay. So at this point, when they start the change management, 10 years elapsed after the launch of the company. Both anomalies and costs were higher than expected, and the relationship with vendors was difficult due to ongoing claims and contract renegotiations. Because remember, I go back a second here. Remember that this is the company, right? They had a go-between vendors and banks. So vendors said, okay, we told you that this project was going to cost this much and it was going to last 1.5 years, because to service 10 banks takes some time. So after maybe 6 or 7 months, they would say, oh, work is much more than what we thought. So instead of giving us, I don't know, 100,000 euros, you have to give us 150,000. So they renegotiate, because when you have long-lasting projects, then maybe, and as we say, complexity, you know, so new problems emerge which you have to face, and you need to have to renegotiate because your costs are going to go high. So vendors, they make an offering, they make a contract, but then they say, if with the project, you have to give us more money. But then there is a limit. So the banks say, look, you have got to learn how to deal with the vendors in a better way, because we are tired of renegotiating often the projects that you approved, and we are tired of seeing the vendors that ask us for more money because they won't go ahead and give us what we need. So there was the need to change this to, you know, anomalies in costs were higher than expected. The relationship with vendors was difficult. So they had to, main feature of the bio-change management, individual in-depth meetings. So how was the change management approach? First decision on the part of the banks. Can you listen are you hearing me?
Yes, Prof.
Okay. So there is no slide to see, just listen to what I have to say. Who's speaking? Who's speaking? Because if you speak on top of me, then we cannot. Okay. Right. So the first decision was, if we have to change this company, are we going to do it on our own? Who's the expert of change management in our banks? No one. So we have to go on to consultants. So how do we choose the consultants? Well, let's go to the Bankers Association and say, who was consulting in some of the banks of the association? So they gave him a few names. They spoke to the banks, and they finally found 3 or 4 consultants, and they asked them to make an offer and say, what's your approach? What are you going to do to face the situation? And so different consultants were there and made a seminar, and one of those consultants was myself, which I went there and I said, well, the basic idea here is that you will have, these are the steps, okay, that I proposed. Individual in-depth meetings were conducted by consultants with 30 middle managers. Say, in order to have this change be successful, you need to involve the middle management, that is the managers that actually had the people that were speaking to vendors and that were speaking to banks to find out the respective needs. So the whole company, not the banks, the whole company, the outsourcing company, had on the whole 200 people, system developers and managers, that is people that were actually supervising the work of from 5 to 7 to 8 people. Okay. Work of the in-house teams with consultants acting as methodologists and facilitators. Strengthening of the training system, the training of the outsourcing company, revision of the communication policy and practice to enhance relations and exchanges with clients, vendors, knowledge centers, drastic change in performance management systems. Now, these were the highlights. So if you can recall from what I said about the Lewin's approach, you know, the fact that you need to involve people from the very beginning, because otherwise change management was just theoretical. So you need to actually support each middle management, actually supervisor of, as I just said, 5 to 8 people that had specific jobs to carry out with respect to either the needs of banks or the projects of the vendors. The consultants, this myself and other people that were working with me would be just methodologists and facilitators. I mean, the best expert are the ones that are working in the company and they know their job. Of course, we could have used some ICT experts, but then it would just be an abstract. They didn't need to understand what were the horizon of innovation in ICT at large. They need to have a problem setting and solving within a their specific situation. So who were the best experts? Were the people working in the company, and they were all well prepared but then they didn't have the methodology concerning change management. And so as consultants, we acted as methodologists and facilitators. The experts of the technology were the ones that were already working in the company. Strengthening the training system. Now, they wanted to hire new and fresh resources. They were actually approaching and implementing the internet as a support to the banking system of the 10 banks. So the important was that new resources getting into the outsourcing company where they had to be trained with different principles. That is, they need to be very proactive. They were young, maybe PhDs or just graduated from universities, and they needed to be trained, quote unquote, to this. They had to become active, and they had to collect not only the techniques that were used in the outsourcing companies, but also the culture of the company. And the culture, what were the cultural basic principles that had to be conveyed to the new resources, young resources without experience, but that were actually studied new concepts, new ways of reasoning with the relationship to vendors and to banks. Revision of the communication policy and practice to enhance relations and exchange with clients, vendors, knowledge centers. Now, communication policy and practice, because if you need to change how you communicate within the company and to the people outside the company in order to make the most out of the expertise that you get in touch with. So this needed to have a methodology of how a new communication policy and practice would be developed. And this again was through in meeting with middle managers. Drastic change in the performance management systems. What is a performance management system? It's the way people in the company are evaluated by their supervisor. So is it going to be a way that we have seen in the McDonald's restaurant or not? Of course not. If you have understood that this is something much more sophisticated than a McDonald's restaurant, right? So you need to have a management system and evaluation that is different, and maybe, and it was even different from the ones that was practiced thus far. Because when you want to change a company, you need also to change on how management and supervisor are acting or communicating or are evaluating the people they work with. So the analysis of the present performance management system was negative, in the sense that it was very formal and not effective. So there was the need to find out a new way to evaluate people. So these were the basic ideas that were actually, that was what I told the CEO and the board of administration. And I said, well, if we have this, if we will carry out this project, these are the main points that we will develop. Do you agree with that? And of course, I made an offering, of course, of how much it would cost them, how long it would last. And if we go back to this, so unfreezing was analyzed the present state of the organization and said it will take us 2 months. We'll have, and then we'll identify the future state with the old people. We'll take another 2 months, implementing actions and evaluation, 6 months, interaction research, and the following year they would actually find out and actually act in a new fashion. The action research was actually ending here after 1 year. So 2 months, 2 months of analysis, 2 months to identify the future state, 6 months to see the pilot projects develop. And then, okay, after 6 months, we decided what was to change, or what was planned, or what was to be confirmed, what were the points of weakness and what were the points of strength, and so on and so forth. Okay, now, so sustaining change, you can see here. You see sustaining change through learning across the board. Individual in-depth meetings were conducted by consult with 30 middle managers. Now, this was supposed to be the support in the learning function within the 200 people of the company. But I will stop here, and tomorrow we'll go on and we'll see in practice how we went through all these points and how we managed to do it in the basic knots that we had to untie. Now, do you have any questions so far? Questions on what we said for this 1.5 hours? If not, we can go on to the questions that Mrs. Grimani was saying. Sano was also, Mr. Sano was asking for the exam, and also another one of you, which I don't remember who was. So who's going to be the first one? Was Sano, Mr. Sano. What was your issue concerning the exam? Wait, we don't need to.
Yes, I just need a clarification. I just need a clarification on the exams, the modalities.
One moment. I just want to stop recording all this.